Hey everybody, I've got a really cool video for you today because we are talking about my top 5 likes and top 5 dislikes surrounding the cheapest new electric car you can buy. So we bought this Chevrolet Bolt just 2 days ago and I've already driven it over 400 miles and I've learned a lot about the car, what's good, what's bad, and we are talking about those in this video. Now a little bit of background, we sought out the most affordable new EV you can buy because people have this perception that buying a new electric car means spending $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. Well, this car we purchased for 26 grand, and if you qualify for the new updated tax credit program, you could get this car for as little as like $18,000 or $19,000 when it's all said and done, and we'll talk about all that in this video. But let's start out with my number 5 like surrounding the Chevrolet Bolt EV, and that is the range. For a car that costs just $26,000, the range is really impressive. An EPA estimated range of 259 miles. Now that is enough range to get you not only places on your daily commute, but it allows you to travel on the weekend, take cool little trips. A really impressive battery considering the price of this car. So a 65 kilowatt hour battery. For perspective, the Mini Cooper SC, which is another one of the most affordable cars you can buy, comes in at roughly $34,000, and that has a 32 kilowatt hour battery, so half as large as this base model Chevrolet Bolt. Even a Nissan Leaf, $28,400, that's a 40 kilowatt hour battery. So the amount of capacity you get per dollar on the Bolt is completely unmatched. And speaking of battery, my number 4 like is actually the onboard charger. The AC charger on this Bolt is really impressive. So there's the charge flap there, you plug it in, and overnight this car will easily charge to full if you have a 48 amp charger. We're talking an 11.5 kilowatt onboard charger. Once again, for perspective, my Mini has a 32 amp charger, and this thing 48 amps. So 65 kilowatt hour battery. We're looking at a charge rate of 11.5 kilowatts. Of course, there are some losses there, but figure a full charge in 6 hours if you have a 240 volt outlet in your house and the correct charger. That is really, really impressive. Now, my number 3 thing, which I really like about the Chevrolet Bolt, actually has to do with the interior space. This is a small car relative to a lot of vehicles on the market. It's a compact hatchback. But check out the room I have in the back seat. There's a lot of clever engineering here. Oh, another cool thing. It's not related, but check this out. Even at 26 grand, you have remote keyless entry. Pretty cool. But check this out. So in the back of the Bolt, I am 6 feet tall. This is my driving position, but look, I've got a good 5-6 inches of legroom, and even headroom wise, because this car does not have one of those new trendy sloping rear ends, I actually have really good headroom. So if you are looking, for example, for a car to not only take your family on trips, but maybe even a car to work as a ride-sharing vehicle when you're not using it for family use, this is pretty awesome. You get so much space relative to the exterior dimensions of the car. So that was 3. Let's go ahead into number 2, and for that case I'm going to have you hop in on the passenger side and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the interior technology. Now, stepping in the Chevrolet Bolt, even if you don't qualify for the $7,500 tax credit, we're looking at a $26,000 car, which is well below the average transaction price now, which is over 40 grand for a new car. 26 grand, some $15,000 less, but look at the tech you get in this car. So with the key in my pocket, I'm gonna start up the 10.2 inch display, and the resolution, the quality, and the user interface on this display is really, really very good. For example, we have not only your expected audio pages, phone connectivity, but you even have like wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto. I'm realizing now that we're using my phone to shoot this, so that's probably not going to boot up, but it's a very effective system and it works really, really, really well. Also, just stuff like the backup camera, right? At $26,000, a lot of cars, even more expensive than this, have a really poor quality backup camera, but not this. It's nice and crisp and it's nice and clear. Now, we don't have a 360-degree camera on this entry-level car, but even still looks really good. So I'm very impressed with the 10.2-inch screen, and I'm also impressed with the driver display there, an 8-inch screen. It's fairly configurable. You have a couple of different themes as well, which you can kind of cycle between. Lots and lots and lots of different settings here. We'll go to like the modern layout. If you want a little bit less information, you can select that. It's just a very, very good setup, and I think that the actual connectivity in this car is extremely impressive for the price point. So that is my, what is that, number 2 case? I think that was my number 2 like on the Chevrolet Bolt, but my number 1 like just has to be how affordable this car is. I mean, we talk about affordable Teslas, for example, right? Being in the high $40,000 range, low $50,000 range. Well, you can get this car for half as much, and it's not like you're getting half the range. You're still getting an impressive 259 miles, which is good enough for most people on a daily basis and even on like a weekend basis for going on small trips. It really does get you a lot of places that you will ever need to go. And the ideal 2-car setup for me would be new Chevrolet Bolt and then like a used Suburban. So you'd have a new Bolt to commute every day to do those fun little trips. And then if you do need to take a road trip once or twice a year, take something like a Suburban, then you'd have a lot of extra space. You could tow, that kind of thing. I think that would be my ideal 2-car setup. But anyways, let's talk about the tax credit a little bit. So $26,000. Now there are income taxes for both individuals and couples, but it is possible to get up to $7,500 back if, of course, your tax liability is great enough. So I wish it was a rebate. I would love that to be the case. I'd love it to be cash on the hood. That would be even better. But it is nice that there are income caps, so it's not only appealing to the ultra wealthy. So this new tax bill has thought about that. Now the deal is it kind of falls into 2 buckets. That $7,500 is broken up into where the vehicle is manufactured. In this case, final assembly is in Michigan, and then where the battery components come from. Now, up until March, the battery component part of that bill has not really been ironed out. So this car currently does apply for the full $7,500. That's how they're getting around it. And then that should change in March. Anyways, the value is just off the hook. But let's talk about some of my dislikes surrounding the Chevrolet Bolt. Now, there are a few areas where I think the cost cutting does come into play. And we're going to come over here, Case. We're going to talk about the seats and the steering wheel because you know, Chevrolet does have to save money somewhere, and the seats are a big improvement over the previous generation. Now, that was one of the big complaints a lot of folks had, was just the terrible comfort that the seats provided. These seats are tolerable. So the old ones I would describe as unacceptable. These ones are okay, but a couple of issues I have with these seats is there's not enough adjustability. So you have up, down, so you can kind of raise and lower the seat. You can also recline and slide, no lumbar. But my bigger issue is there's just not enough thigh support. So if you're over 6 feet tall, you end up having, at least I end up having, a lot of my leg kind of extend beyond the base cushion, which is a little bit unfortunate. So the seats are still not my favorite in the industry. Big step up compared to the previous gen Bolt, but still not fantastic. And then the steering wheel. Now, I feel like Chevrolet's done a pretty good job overall making the touch points on this interior feel good. Like, obviously, some of the dash materials and some of the, you know, bits and bobs that you don't often touch are a little cheap. But across the board, the things you do, like the door handles and the shift buttons and the screen, they do feel good, except for the steering wheel. Now, if you do upgrade to like a 2LT leather interior, you get a nicer steering wheel. But this 1LT steering wheel feels very Fisher-Price and just not very good. So I wish that you would get at least like a vinyl wrap steering wheel, you know, from the base spec, because this plastic one definitely feels like a $20,000 car, which of course it is. Now, another thing I kind of dislike about the Bolt is some of the trimmings in the trunk. Once again, talk about cost cutting. And there's areas which really don't matter. Like, if you look up here, you got like a lot of these little nubs left from the actual manufacturing process of some of these materials, and like this little parcel shelf is one of the flimsiest I've ever seen. But I did discover a pretty big issue trying to get my Bernese Mountain Dog back here. When you fold the seat down, it folds nice and flat, that's great. But then the floor is extremely flimsy. So as he was kind of getting positioned, he actually got stuck in the floor by stepping here on this little crack. And it's just not very well made, and the floor itself is also very flimsy. You can kind of see how the handle doesn't look super good. It's a little bit unfinished. So he did get stuck in here, and I had to wrangle him out, but that was a little bit unfortunate. So if you're carrying dogs, I definitely recommend carrying them with the seats up, or if you're carrying kind of odd shaped items, it's worth noting that it is possible to get that floor to kind of pivot like that. Okay, so let's go on and talk a little bit more about some of the things I dislike. Case, I'm going to have you hop in the passenger seat. I want to talk about a tech thing which I don't like. So I mentioned that the screen tells you a lot of good info, and that is very true. And it also gives you some good settings. It also tracks a lot of fingerprints. I'm sure you're seeing that now on camera. I do apologize about that. This is real world testing. Now, check out the little energy screen here. So first of all, I love that you can change the charge limits. Super easy to do that just by moving that little slider up and down. So you can set anywhere from like 40 to 100% charge limit. And I also like a lot of the energy screen. So for example, this detail screen tells you where the kilowatt hours have gone as you drive along. We also have this impact screen, which I think is very, very cool. So this will tell you, for example, based on your driving technique, are you adding to the range or are you subtracting to the range? So you can see based on our climate settings, and our outside temperature, we're actually subtracting 3.2 miles from the range. So that's all good. What I dislike though is there's no way in the car to see a current SOC or state of charge. So if you look here in the display case, we've got this basically little graph with these little clicks indicating 0, 25, 50, 75, and 100% full. So you can kind of estimate the current state of charge via that. We also, of course, have the estimated miles, and then I can also change this to kind of display a little bit more information so you can see the max and the minimum miles it predicts. But in this center screen, it does not display the current state of charge numerically. And we also see that here. Now, this is about as close as you can get from a driver's perspective in finding the state of charge. So you have this little indicator here with 20 notches, and each notch is 5% of the battery. So you can kind of count and be like 5, 10, 15, 12. But it's so small and hard to do, you really can't do that when moving. Now, on the app, on the integrated smartphone app, it will tell you your current state of charge. And there are certain OBD dongles, which I've heard you can plug in to read it as well. But I'd love it if General Motors would integrate that functionality into the screen here. I really think that would be fantastic. Now, my next dislike surrounding the Chevrolet Bolt has to do with charging one more time, actually. So, level 1, level 2, very, very effective charging. Level 3, however, is not as effective. So we're living in an age where most new EVs will charge well over 150 kilowatts, right? That's kind of become the new standard. But like the Ioniqs from Hyundai, the EV6 from Kia, right? We're talking well over 200 kilowatts. They advertise like 10 to 80% in 18 minutes. The Chevrolet Bolt, you get 100 miles of range according to Chevrolet in 30 minutes. And that's because this vehicle has a 55 kilowatt peak charge rate. So just over 50 kilowatts. Now I did plug it into a charger when it was a low SOC and I was able to get that 55, but that is still a pretty unimpressive number. 100 miles of range gained in 30 minutes would have been very, very good. I would say in, 2013, but as we go into 2022, it just really isn't very, very good. You can tell that this car is intended to be more of a city-oriented vehicle than a road tripper, which is fine, right? I think that, that's probably okay for what the vehicle is, but it's just worth noting that, yes, you can DC fast charge it, but not at a very quick rate. Now let's take this vehicle for a spin and we'll talk about some other likes and dislikes as we get behind the wheel. Now, first of all, the powertrain calibration in this car is excellent. General Motors has done an excellent job in making it feel smooth, yet very torquey, and pretty fun actually from an acceleration standpoint. So 200 horsepower, 266 pound-feet of torque, which does not sound like a lot, but they're predicting 0 to 60 time in 6.5 seconds. And what makes it feel especially quick is that we are located here at a mile above sea level in Colorado. So every internal combustion vehicle is down a certain percentage. Turbocharging helps a little bit, but even still, we're talking like down 15% or so in the acceleration department. So when you get behind the wheel of an electric vehicle, when you plant it, it's really, really quick, and it feels a lot quicker. It punches above its weight class is what I'm trying to say. Now, a drawback, and that's another one of my dislikes that we just saw, is you do get some torque steer and you do get a lot of wheel spin. These stock all-season tires are very unimpressive. So we are obviously here in January in Colorado. I have driven it through some snow, and it does not perform very well at all in the snow on these stock all-season tires. Now, here's the thing, right? Obviously, in some countries, they mandate snow tires. Here in Colorado, they don't. I strongly suggest them to everybody, but it's worth noting that even if you don't switch to snow tires, certain all-season tires perform better than other all-season tires, and these ones, they just don't cut the biscuit. So that is one of my bigger disappointments. Apart from that, though, the Bolt is a really nice thing to drive, and I love the one-pedal driving. So you can see down here, we've got this little green button, and you can turn one pedal on and off, and you can even add some additional braking force by pulling on this little paddle here on the steering wheel. So if you're slowing down using one pedal and you're not quite going to make the stop sign or stoplight, you can pull this little paddle and it'll actually slow down more, adding more energy into the battery. That's really, really good. And I'm actually impressed with the ride quality and the sound isolation in here. So it's a pretty quiet cabin, and it's also a surprisingly comfortable cabin, which I really appreciate, considering the price point of this vehicle. Now, I do want to talk about my number one dislike on this car, though. What is going on here? Oh, I was in the settings. My number one dislike on this car has to do with the price and the value, which we talked about earlier. The manufacturer suggested retail price is very low. It did go up like $900 this past week, but it still is the most affordable EV on the market by quite some margin, which is fantastic. But in the real world, you have to go through a dealer to purchase this vehicle because of our dealer laws here in the US and how Chevrolet sells their cars. Now, what this means is that finding not only a 1LT, but a 1LT with no options and a 1LT that's being sold at MSRP is a challenge. It is. I mean, I was poking around on Auto Tempest and looking at various dealers throughout the country, and a lot of them are still going, at least according to the websites, for $2,000 above MSRP. In some cases, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 above MSRP, and that is such a bummer because as certain other EV companies like Rivian, like Tesla, will sell you a vehicle from their website at exactly that price, it still is such a painful process to have to go to a dealer and try to convince them to sell the car at the price that Chevrolet wants them to sell the car at, right? And even our experience, I think people think, oh, you have a YouTube channel, you got preferential treatment. We had to fight to get this car at the price that we wanted. Even having a YouTube channel. Now, we didn't come out being like, oh, we have a YouTube channel, give us a deal. We approached this as any other consumer would, and we did have to fight. So first we had to track one down. This car is a 2022. So a dealer we had talked to called us up out of the day and said, hey, I've got a 2022 I could sell you, $32,000. Well, we were savvy enough to know, okay, hang on, General Motors dropped the price $5,900, so that would be crazy to buy it at $32,000. So we got $5,900 off the price. And then we asked, are there any ADMs, additional dealer markups? And then the salesperson said, oh, I got to go check on that. And my dad, Roman, he flat out said, he's like, we will not be paying any additional markups. We will take our money elsewhere if that's the case. So ultimately, the dealer came back and said, all right, we will sell it to you at the 2023 pricing at sticker. And we're like, great. And then he sends us the final price, what it would be after taxes. And there's a $799 Colorado package that the dealer added on. And that I don't really know what it gave us, but we're not interested in any additional packages. I personally find that they're typically just a way for a dealer to add profit without actually giving you that much in return. So we said, we're not going to be paying the $799 Colorado package. And then the dealer said, well, you have to. And we're like, well, then we're not going to buy the car. And he said, all right, we'll take another $799 off that price to compensate for that. So it's a painful experience. I would love to be able to go on the Chevrolet website, click buy it now, and then go and pick it up at the price that the website says. But it just doesn't work like that in the real world. And that's an advantage that Tesla has. That's an advantage that Rivian has. That's an advantage that these new EV manufacturers that are selling directly to the OEM have. So that is a shame. It's a bummer that super affordable MSRP is not always reflective of the final price of the car, and I wish it was. But overall, if you can track one of these down at sticker, it's a heck of a car. It really is. It doesn't feel like after tax credits, if you apply, it doesn't feel like a sub $20,000 car. It drives well, it's quiet, the suspension is pretty good, the brakes feel excellent, right? The tech is good. Sure, if you start poking around at some of the materials, right? Like, yeah, but you're not caressing your car here, right? Like, who cares if that's leather wrapped or not? As a vehicle to get you to and from work, to save you a lot of money in the long term, the Bolt is an excellent choice. I don't understand how Chevrolet is selling a 65 kilowatt hour car for $26,000. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I can't foresee that there's a lot of profit in that. I mean, if you compare this car pricing compared to the previous generation entry-level Bolt, it's like $10,000 less. And as everything in the world is getting more expensive, to have a car drop $10,000 is pretty nuts. Now, I know there's going to be about 1,000 comments saying, oh, you don't buy a Bolt, it's going to catch on fire. This car has gone through its obligatory safety recall. I'm very confident that this vehicle is going to be safe. We also had a seatbelt recall, which I believe was done as well because it was sold to us under the pretext that there were no open recalls on the vehicle. So, yeah, I'm not worried about the battery fire thing. Even if I drove an older Bolt, I personally probably wouldn't be that worried about it either, because if you look at the statistics of how many EVs catch on fire compared to gasoline cars, it's a tiny percentage. But of course, a lot of folks use that as an excuse to put down EVs. I'm not falling for it. But that's regardless. This car has gone through its mandatory recall, so the battery should be nice and safe. So overall, really happy with the car. 26 grand. If you can find one at that price, buy it. You can get the 2LT with more tech and with the leather. I probably wouldn't. I know I complained about like the plastic steering wheel. The savings of 1LT to 2LT, or the savings to not get the leather, is definitely worth it in my book. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. As always, it's been Tommy behind the camera. As always, Case is killing it. We'll see you in the next video.